Blood never belongs on a fence post. Not out here where the land wakes slow and quiet, and a man can spend half his life trying to forget the world that broke him. But that morning, Caleb Thorne saw a streak of dark red drying under the rising sun, and it stopped him right in the middle of his ride. He reined in his horse and stared. The world around him was still. Nothing but wind brushing through sagebrush and the soft groan of his saddle leather. Caleb was 52, carved by years of hard sun and harder silence. 12 years living alone on this patch of dirt had turned him into a man who liked his routines simple and his company non-existent. Yet here he was, looking at blood that had no business being there. He slid off his horse, boots landing on dry earth with a dull thud. The blood trail led toward the far stretch of his field, the part folks never crossed unless they were lost or desperate. Caleb followed it, rifle slung in his hand, each step kicking up little clouds of dust. Then he saw her. A young woman lay crumpled beside the fence line, half hidden by tall grass. Her dress was torn, her face streaked with dirt, and her breathing came in short, uneven pulls like she had been running far longer than her strength allowed. One hand clutched her side where blood had soaked through the fabric. The other dragged weakly across the ground, as if even in her final moments she was trying to crawl somewhere. Caleb approached her slow, careful, the way a man approaches a wounded animal that might still bite from fear or alone. Her eyelids fluttered. When they opened, he saw green eyes clouded with pain and dust, eyes that watched him with the sharp instinct of someone who had been hunted. He knelt beside her. His shadow fell across her face, and she flinched as though shadows scared her more than sunlight ever could. When she tried to speak, her first breath cracked. The second carried a whisper he barely heard. "Please, don't take me back." Caleb felt the words hit him in a place he thought had long turned to stone. He had heard fear before. He had heard lies, desperation, and every excuse a man could imagine. But this voice was not lying. It was pleading. It was broken. He glanced across the open land, scanning the distant hills. This kind of fear did not appear alone. It had riders behind it. Men who would follow blood until the trail ended. One way or another, Caleb looked down at her again, at the trembling in her fingers. The dirt stuck to the sweat on her skin, the sheer determination it must have taken for her to reach his land at all. He knew nothing about her. He did not need to. Some dangers you hear coming. Some dangers you feel. And some dangers arrive in the shape of a stranger collapsed at your doorstep. The question now was simple. What force could drive a young woman this far into the wild, leaving blood on a fence post that had not seen trouble in more than a decade? Caleb Thorne lifted the young woman in his arms, careful not to press on the wound at her side. She was lighter than he expected. The kind of light that comes from too many miles traveled with too little food and too much fear. Her breath brushed weakly against his shirt as he carried her toward the cabin that had been his only companion for 12 long years. Inside, he laid her gently on the narrow cot near the window. The cabin smelled of dry wood, old tobacco, and the faint trace of coffee that had sat on the stove since dawn. It was the smell of a quiet life, a life that was being torn open again in ways he had never planned for. Caleb fetched a basin of water, tore a strip from a clean cloth, and uncorked a small bottle of whiskey that had been meant for cold nights and old memories. He cleaned the dirt from her wound, watching the way her jaw tightened with pain. She did not cry out. That alone told him plenty. When she finally opened her eyes again, they were clearer than before, though still rimmed with exhaustion. For a moment, she simply watched him, trying to decide if he was danger or salvation. Caleb kept working in silence. Talking too soon never helped anyone. After a while, she whispered, voice thin and raw, "Thank you." Her fingers clutched the blanket as though she needed something solid to hold on to. Caleb nodded once. "You ran a long way. Someone chasing you." The question lingered in the air like dust caught in a beam of sunset. She hesitated, then swallowed hard. "Yes, they will not stop. Not until they finish what they started." Caleb leaned back on the stool beside the cot. He had seen this kind of fear before, years ago, back when men with guns answered only to the weight of their own greed. He had buried too many truths ever to mistake this look for anything else. What did they start? His voice stayed calm, but the tone carried the steel of a man who wanted the truth and would accept nothing less. The woman closed her eyes for a moment as if gathering strength. Then she spoke. "My name is Lena Carter. My family had a small claim near Silver Mesa. We found a vein of ore, richer than anything we had ever seen." Word spread fast, too fast. Caleb felt his jaw tighten as she continued. "A man named Cole Maddox wanted it. He is foreman at the mining camp. He sent his hired guns one night. They said they only wanted to talk, but men like that do not come for talk." Her voice cracked. And she pulled the blanket closer. "They took our claim. They took everything. I only escaped because I ran when they thought I was dead. They want to finish the job so no one knows what they did." Caleb sat there without moving, letting her words settle like dust after a hard ride. He'd seen greed destroy families before, but something in this story cut sharper, deeper. Maybe it was the memory of his own past. Maybe it was the quiet way she spoke, as if every word cost more strength than she had left. Outside, a crow called from the fence line. The land was still, but the stillness felt like the breath before a storm. One truth was becoming clearer with every passing second. If Lena Carter was telling the truth, then trouble was already closer than either of them wanted to believe. Caleb stayed on the stool beside Lena for a long moment, letting her story sink into the cracks of that small cabin. Silver Mesa, a stolen claim. Men hired to kill. It all fit too neatly, too perfectly, the way bad things often did when greed was steering the reins. Outside the window, the land stretched quiet and wide, but Caleb knew better than to trust quiet. He rose slowly, joints stiff from years of hard work and harder memories, and walked to the door. He pushed it open just enough to look out across the field. Nothing moved except the wind, bending the tall grass. Still, the unease stayed with him. When he turned back, Lena was watching him, her eyes worried and sharp. "Do you think they found my trail?" Caleb answered with the kind of honesty the plains demand. "If they want you this bad, they will follow dust itself." He crossed the room, pulled the old rug aside, and lifted the trap door hidden beneath it. The hinges groaned from disuse, complaining like old bones. He pointed down into the dark space below. "You will be safe down there until I know what is coming." Lena hesitated, her fingers twisting the blanket around her. Her voice trembled. "If they come, you cannot face them alone." Caleb looked her straight in the eye. "I have been alone a long time, long enough to know what I can handle." For a moment she did not move. Then she took in a slow breath, gathered her strength, and climbed down the ladder. Caleb lowered the trapdoor and stretched the rug back into place, then stood still, listening. The cabin settled around him, creaking the way old wood always creaked. But one sound did not belong. Hoofbeats, faint at first, distant, steady. Caleb stepped to the window and peered out toward the far ridge. 4 riders emerged from behind a low rise. Their silhouettes moved with purpose. Men hired to track and finish a job. Men who wanted no witnesses. The riders slowed near the fence line, looking at the ground as their horses tossed their heads. One rider dismounted and crouched low, studying the earth. Caleb knew exactly what he was looking for. Tracks, blood, any sign of a wounded woman trying to outrun death. The rider stood again and pointed toward the cabin. Even from a distance, Caleb felt the shift in the air, that moment when violence recognizes its destination. He stepped out onto the porch, rifle held loose but ready, the boards under his boots groaning in warning. The lead rider called out, his voice sharp as dry whiskey. "We are hunting a thief, a liar, a trespasser. She ran through here. We just want to ask a few questions," Caleb answered without blinking. "This land does not get visitors. You will not find what you're looking for." The riders exchanged glances, their horses fidgeting under the hot sun. Tension moved between them like a rattler sliding through underbrush. Caleb felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders, because everything depended on what happened next, and the riders had already decided they were not leaving without searching his land. The riders drew closer, their horses snorting clouds of dust as they stopped just a few yards from Caleb's porch. The lead man sat straight in the saddle, hands loose near his holster, eyes sharp with the confidence of someone who had hurt enough people to believe he would never pay for any of it. Caleb felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his stance relaxed, the rifle balanced lightly in his hands. The man called out again, "We will search your barn and your shed. It will only take a minute." Caleb gave him a slow nod. A free land lets a man make his own choices, but you should think twice before stepping where you are not welcome. The riders exchanged looks. The kind of looks men share right before trouble sharpens. One of them clicked his tongue and guided his horse forward. Another followed, heading toward the barn. The third dismounted and began examining the dirt near the fence line. Caleb watched him closely. Tracking was an art, and that man moved like an artist. The lead rider stayed where he was, staring at Caleb as if trying to peel away every secret with nothing more than his gaze when he smirked. "A quiet life out here. Strange that you would not notice someone passing through," Caleb answered with the calm of a man who had spent years choosing silence over company. "I notice what I need to notice." The rider studying the dirt suddenly raised his hand. Caleb felt the shift in the air. The man knelt again, brushed the soil with his fingertips, then pointed straight toward the cabin door. Fresh tracks. Small. Light. "Not your boots. Someone came here this morning." The lead rider grinned, showing the kind of smile that only grows from bad intentions. "Seems you have company after all." Caleb did not move. His heartbeat stayed steady, the way it had learned to stay steady long ago when survival depended on it. Inside the cabin, he imagined Lena holding her breath in the darkness under the floor. He hoped the trapdoor would hold. He hoped her fear would stay quiet. The lead rider swung down from his horse and stepped toward the port. His boots crushed the brittle grass beneath them, each step slow and deliberate, like he wanted Caleb to hear every inch of his approach. When he reached the bottom of the steps, he rested his hand lightly on his pistol. Men who rest their hands like that rarely rest long. Caleb raised his rifle just a little, not enough to start a fight, but enough to show the line in the dirt had been drawn. The rider tilted his head and said softly, "We are going inside." Before Caleb could answer, a sharp crack echoed from the cabin behind him. A floorboard. Just one, just enough. The rider's eyes narrowed. He had heard it too. In that instant, the calm morning shifted into something hungry and dangerous, and Caleb Thorne understood that the first shot was coming soon. The floorboard had barely finished echoing when the lead rider reached for his pistol. Caleb moved first. Not fast the way young men move, but fast the way experience moves. His rifle fired once, and the shot slammed the rider backward, knocking him into the dust where he did not rise again. The other men reacted instantly. Gunfire cracked across the quiet land, breaking the morning wide open. Caleb dove behind the porch rail as bullets tore through wood and sent splinters flying. He worked the lever of his rifle, fired again, then shifted before the next round chipped the post beside his head. From inside the cabin, a muffled cry told him Lena had heard everything. He prayed she stayed low. Her wound would not let her fight for long. This battle was on him. Two riders took cover behind the water trough. One stayed near the barn wall, firing in tight bursts. Caleb counted their shots, counted their footing, counted the shrinking distance between life and death. He had not wanted this fight. He had not wanted anything to change, but change had come, and he was not the kind of man to let it walk all over him. With the riders focused on the porch, Caleb slipped off to the side and sprinted toward the barn. His legs burned and his breath harsh, but he pushed through. Inside the barn, he found a crate of old supplies, relics from a mining job he once worked before life sent him down a different road. He spotted what he needed, a single stick of mining explosive wrapped in worn paper. Fuse still usable. He had kept it for years, telling himself he should throw it out one day. He never did. He lit the fuse with shaking fingers, whispered a quiet prayer, and rolled the explosive across the dirt toward the trough where two riders were hiding. It bounced once, twice. Then a sharp roar tore through the air. Dirt and smoke blasted upward as the trough shattered into pieces. When the dust settled, one rider lay motionless. Another was dragging himself away, wounded and ready to flee. The last man near the barn wall stared in shock, then threw down his gun, scrambled onto his horse, and rode hard for the hills. Silence settled slowly over the ranch, a silence that carried weight. Caleb walked back toward the cabin, rifle still hot in his hands. Lena pushed open the door, pale and trembling, but alive. She looked at the bodies, then at him. Her voice broke. "Is it done?" Caleb nodded. "For now. But truth has a way of finding daylight. They will answer for what they did at Silver Mesa, at first light." Caleb pulled on his boots and reached for his hat. Lena watched him from the cot, worry back in her eyes. "Where are you going?" "To the nearest town. Somebody has to speak for your family." Her fingers tightened around the edge of the blanket. Her voice cracked. "Please, don't do that. If they know I'm alive, they will come back for both of us." Caleb held her gaze, the weight of his choice heavy but solid. "They are already coming. The difference now is whether they come as shadows or as men. The law is waiting for—" Caleb saddled his horse and rode to the nearest town, carrying the truth on his shoulders and Lena's words in his mind. Days later, officials from the county arrived. Lena told her story. They listened. This time, the law listened. And the land finally breathed again. Caleb repaired his fence in the evenings while Lena sat on the porch, the healing sun on her face. The quiet felt different now, not empty, not lonely, just honest. He had spent 12 years hiding from the world, but one stranger collapsing at his fence had reminded him of something important. A man is not meant to carry his past like a chain. Sometimes he has to break it. Sometimes he has to stand up again. Sometimes the hardest road is the one that leads home. So here's a thought for you. When life brings someone to your door who needs your courage, will you step back or step forward? If this story stayed with you even a little, give it a like. It helps more than you think. And if you want more journeys across the Old West, feel free to subscribe and ride along with the next